Good morning.
Hey, happy Tuesday to everybody.
Welcome.
So glad that you're with us. I'm Kim Spillers.
And I'm Frank Spillers, and welcome to Rural Community Solutions TV live stream. If you're on our YouTube channel, it's Rural Community Solutions TV. If you're on our Facebook page, it's Rural Community Solutions. But either way, you get us.
And we're so glad that you're here. Thanks for joining us. You could be other places, but if you'd like to design family-friendly, youth-centered places, it's a good thing that you're with us because that's just what we do with Rural Community Solutions.
And so as we rebuild your community, or as you rebuild your community coming out of the COVID crisis,
we're happy to help.
But you really have to take a look at what are you doing to be different. And that's what we try to push you to do, is to think differently than you have thought prior to going into the COVID shutdown. And no matter where your community is, if it's in a rural area, that's our expertise, that's our specialty, is working with rural communities. But our message really resonates for businesses, it resonates for neighborhoods, it resonates for urban centers, anything to deal with change. And what we like to say is think like an entrepreneur and become a spark plug. And when we say become that spark plug, what that really means is be the person that ignites action, right? And so just like if you're in your car, you sit down, you turn that key on, what really starts your engine is the ignition. It's the spark that comes from the spark plug that explodes the combustion. If you have a combustion engine, which normally you really do in your car, combustion, the gas goes into the carburetor, the spark plug sparks, and it goes boom. I think that's how it works. Sometimes
that's good.
Sometimes I have a problem with how do you open the hood, and I look at the engine and I go, yep, that's an engine. That's my mechanical ability. So when that spark then goes like this, your engine starts and it takes that gas. But it also takes you as a driver to move the car. And with our formula, cars, C plus A equals R, it's where you're parked at. Those are your circumstances. Where are you parked? Then where do you want to go? That's the results. Wherever you drive to, that's your results. But to get from where you are to where you want to go, you have to drive. You have to create that action. And that's really what we're here to do, is to get you to think differently, to get you to think action-wise, to get you to think, where do you really want to go, and make an intention of where do you want to go. Because if you don't intend to get any place, why go?
And you won't.
Sometimes it's great to get into your car and just drive without any knowledge of where you're going to end up, except are you coming back home?
I want to make sure you have gas.
And your gas and coming back home.
Yes.
So that's, your intention is just to go out and drive someplace and you don't know really where you're going, but your intention always is to come back to where you started and be better than you were when you left, because there's a reason why you're going out and driving, and that might be mentally. It might be to clear your head, might be just to see different scenery, might be just to get you out of the house, just something to get you to change the scenery. That always helps. But it's the intention of what is that goal? What is the result of you driving your car? That's it. That's the bottom line. And so to really get to that bottom line, we want to help you think like an entrepreneur. And entrepreneurs don't think in popular terms. Because when you think in popular terms, one, you're not thinking, because everybody thinks that way. So you're not really thinking. You don't have to think, because everybody thinks that way. And you're also slow to embrace change. Let me say that a little louder. You're slow to embrace change. Right? Everybody loves change. Here at Rural Community Solutions, we say everybody loves change.
What we don't like
is transition. People don't like transition. Right? And so go ahead. You found the saying.
Absolutely.
You found the saying.
Yes. What we don't like is transition. So the frequent example that we use is cell phones. 15 years ago, how many of us had a cell phone? Well, some. but probably not the mass population. So now, how many of us would not leave our homes to go anywhere, even run in the store? I almost feel like I'm being a rebel when I leave my phone at home to run an errand, to go to the store, to do something like that. It's like, oh, I'm off the grid. So the change has taken place. What was kind of tough, and what continues sometimes to be tough, is when we get a new device and we have to learn a new program, or we have to figure it out differently, or they reshuffle things and we have to do some learning. That transition is what can challenge us every once in a while. But what we really do like is change. We just have to figure out the transition to navigate us. So that's part of the whole CAR formula: circumstances plus action equals your results. For your communities, that's what we need to address, is what kind of change do you want? And how can we take you through that transition so you successfully come out with the goals that you have set for yourself on the other side as your results?
So you're going to change regardless if you want to change or not. That's just it. Your environment's going to change. The future's going to change. Everything is changing. You can control that change by working towards and working within and transitioning from where you are to where you want to go, because as the environment changes, you have to adapt with that environment. And so when we say people like change, they don't like transition, and sometimes they don't like transition, they just like tweaking. Right? So they like to take the current circumstances and transition, but just tweak it just enough to say, yep, we changed. We transitioned from here to here. But that's really not what you have to plan. You have to make big transitions, big transitions. The environment is changing so fast that we have to make big transition. And sometimes that's 180 degrees. And that's what we're trying to do in rural America, is to make a 180-degree transition from recruiting companies and focusing on traditional economic development activities to attracting, not recruiting, attracting people. And when you attract people, you create that environment to where people want to live, people that you choose to live there. All right. Also, popular thinking is you just accept average results. We don't want average anymore. We don't want the average results anymore, because where has average gotten us? Right? Where has average gotten us? What I'm going to share with you now is some research that I did a couple of years ago based upon the census material. Now, this came out of the community survey of the census material. It is dated, but they don't update this data except about every 10 years, once every 10 years of the new census. And so this was 2010, 2016 data, and some of it might change, but it hasn't changed drastically on there. And we're going to see another tweak because we're in a census count. So if I hope everybody got to fill out their census. All right. So I hope you just took that step and you filled out your census no matter where you are. But let me show you this right now. This is the census material taken between 2010 and 2016 of the top 10 states' percentage of residents who were born there. All right. So here is what we call the native born. All right. Native born people that were born and raised and live in the state where they live. So here in Iowa, all right, if you were born and raised, she was born and raised in Des Moines, in Iowa, and lives in Iowa. So she's a native born. Yes. I'm not. All right. I was born and raised in South Dakota, moved to the evil Western Empire, according to Iowa, of Nebraska. And then I moved to Iowa. All right. So I'm a Midwest born and raised person, but I'm not native born to the state that I live in. This is research done on native borns. Now look at here. Here's Louisiana. 78.8% of those of Louisianans,
I think so,
are people that live in Louisiana. 78.8% of them were born and raised there. The top 10 that are on this list, and I don't know if you can read that or not, it's pretty small, but Louisiana, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Mississippi, Iowa, West Virginia, Kentucky, and number 10 is Alabama. It goes from 78.8% down to 70%. Louisiana down to Alabama. And so as we look at this percentage of native born, then I put it up against how big and how fast, or how percentage wise, what was their population growth. Now, Louisiana's population growth was 28th, number 28. It's number 1 in native born, but 28th in population growth. They grew a whopping 3.27%.
Just fairly impressive.
It really is. That's a pretty, according to this list of where things are growing. Now, Iowa, 71.7% of native borns were born and raised there, grew at 2.9%, or 29th. Right? West Virginia has 71.1%. They lost population of 1.18%. They are 50th. They are the slowest growing state in the country. Right? And so when you look at the opposite side of the 10 states, here's the smallest population of native born. We go from Oregon to Nevada. Nevada has 24.3% native born. They grew at a rate of 8.8%. Colorado has 42.5% native born, and they grew at a rate of 10.17%. Now, here's the result of that survey, is that when states have more native born people in it, in other words, people that were born and raised there and living there, they are growing slower than people with lower native born populations. Right? And so it's harsh. And what I say then to states that are slow growing but have a high native born population, it's harsh, but I ask you as a state, are you welcoming enough? Do you embrace and welcome newcomers? Do you attract new people? If you have more people that are born and raised in your state, that's a double-edged sword. It's great. People aren't leaving. They like your state, right? But you're not inviting new people in. You're not growing at a fast rate. You're not growing and attracting those people. You have to check your environment. And so if you're not growing at a fast enough rate and getting new people in, you have to ask yourself, why? Why is it? What is our attitude? Now, a lot of people don't like to hear this message because everybody is proud of their state. Everybody is proud of their community. So, but you have to look at the hard facts of that. You really have to. Now, that's that unpopular type of thinking, okay? Popular type of thinking is we have the best quality of life than any other state in the country. I don't know why nobody would want to live here. I don't know why people don't want to just flock here and live. Right? And so that is popular thinking. That's the way we should be thinking. That's the way we need to think. However, thinking in an unpopular way is ripping back the rug and looking at what you have been bearing underneath that rug for years and years and years as a culture. What do we really need to look at? What do we really need to address so we can start changing our environment that is going to attract people to us? And that's where the hard work starts. And so in rural America, what we need to do is start looking at that as a long-term commitment and a long-term effort that people really need to start looking at. Now, even as a company, if you want to attract new people, you have to look at your culture. Do you welcome new employees? Are they embraced? Or are they just kind of taken around, introduced to people, and then you drop them in and say, go at it. All right.
You're on your own.
You're on your own. Here you go. There's your desk. Here's your stuff. Or do you create that environment that helps to integrate them into the company, to help integrate them into the company culture, to help integrate them into feeling more like they belong? Because people on the bottom of the spectrum, the the pyramid that we build is relationship is its foundation. In order to create wealth, you need to build relationships first. And people need to feel like they belong. After food, shelter, and clothing, according to Maslow's hierarchy, after food, shelter, and clothing, the next step up is people need to feel they belong. People need to feel that they belong to something bigger than themselves, something that incorporates them, something that brings them in together, that they can be then part of the process and not feel ostracized. That's where that's at. They need to feel like where they are, they belong and they are wanted. That is the number one thing in building those relationships. That's the number one thing in building a welcoming environment. That's the number one thing in building a culture that will attract people.
So an example, perhaps, that might be easy to grasp is that in rural America, in rural towns, we have such wonderful history. We have great depth. We have generation after generation after generation. I was just on a call, and one of the women on it was she and her husband are going to build a cabin, they plan to, on land that's been in his family for 250 years. That's history, and that's wonderful, and that's a lot of pride and personal, just how it touches that family personally. In rural areas, sometimes when we get new people who come in with different ideas, who maybe look like us, but they come from a different part of the state or they come from a different part of the country, they bring new ideas. Sometimes in rural America, we get a little skeptical of people when their grandparents aren't buried in the cemetery, or their great-grandparents aren't buried in the cemetery, so that they have history, they have knowledge, they have experiences in the area. And we want to make sure that if we're going to grow and we get to welcoming new people, and we want to flip those numbers for that graph that Frank was showing, if we want to do that, then we have to be open to those ideas and those people so that they feel like they belong, because what we're seeing more and more is that people will choose where they live, and then they'll bring their business or they'll start their business where they want to live. But they're so movable these days. Families who don't, or people who don't feel like they have a place, like they're valued, like they belong, that they're welcome, they'll just find a different community. So that's where we really encourage rural communities to look real seriously at your culture. We might say we're welcoming, but if you ask, a really good idea is to talk to somebody who's lived in your community 5, 10, 25, 30 years. Ask them whether or not they feel like they belong. And you're going to get a really good answer to what your culture might be like as your community continues to grow.
Okay, so there's some strategic approaches that you really need to take as you're walking through and building your community. And one of those is to prepare your school district communities, right? All the communities in your school district to welcome and engage newcomers. That is to invite their ideas, invite their volunteers, invite who they are as a welcoming community. And that is more than a welcome wagon approach. That I need to graft a new approach, because some of you younger folks out there that are listening don't know what the welcome wagon is.
No.
On that. And so
that's true.
A welcoming approach is the person out there, the Chamber of Commerce person out there that welcomes people into your community or just to within your neighborhood. Do you actively invite them to groups? Do you actively invite them to the church? Do you actively invite them to other places? Do you maybe take some bread over to them or something like that? And do you engage them when you see them? Or are you just so busy with your own life that you don't want to involve them? And that's sometimes that does happen. I'm not saying you have to drop everything, but treat everybody as a neighbor. That's just how you reach out. Then the second one is identify and build relationships and recruit people globally from around the world through social networking in the age group of 30 to 49-year-olds. Now, we choose 30 to 49-year-olds because they will bring school-age kids with them. And so 30 to 49-year-olds are those folks that have started the family. They are looking at how maybe settling down and really finding that community they can raise their families in. And these days, the millennials, which are in that age, I mean, some of them are past that prime of that, but this is millennials. They're looking for an experience to where they can belong to something. They can belong to a community. It's all about, do we help people feel like they belong where they are? Okay. Now, here's what people are looking for. This is what a worker really wants. They want a work-life balance. Their family is their desire for flexible work. They want to save more time. They want to save more money. They're looking to ditch the commute. They don't want to commute anymore. So people are flocking out of the cities, and they're looking for, where can I not have to commute? Maybe I walk a couple of blocks, and that is my commute to a job. All right. They love to telecommute 100% of the time. On Friday, I'm going to talk to you about a major global company that is giving all their workers the chance to work from home. Stay tuned. Come back on Friday, and I'll tell you which company that is. They also want flexible or alternative work schedules. So what a company needs to do, what you need to do in your community, is to reach out, find out your commuting patterns. And when you work with us, you will have a commuting pattern. You'll know where your workers are coming from. On your community patterns, okay, you want to work with those companies and see if they have family-friendly, flexible policies for their employees. Right? Specifically, if they have employees that have children 0 to 5, that is the critical time that you as a company, you as a community, need to embrace kids, because that is when their brain is developing. I'm not getting into that. That's another show. We've done it. And the return on investment for your community to embrace 0 to 5-year-olds is extremely important and extremely high when you invest in early care and education, because that's part of your workforce. And then you also need to look at your community foundation, or an idea of how do you build a new structure to capture the wealth that's going to be transferred from one generation to the next generation over the course of the next 20 to 30 years. Our communities are full of wealth, and we need to find a way of how to capture that.
Yes, absolutely. So those are a number of very practical steps. That is, we have institutes that go into much more detail, but that's the highlight of what communities could be looking for. We want to help you to be able to think like an entrepreneur and become a spark plug. And those strategic approaches are some of the ways that you can do that.
Sorry about that. I was choking, so I kind of nudged her to take over, and she wasn't ready for that. So
That's okay.
Here she is, clawing it. Okay, what do I say? What do I say now?
Did I do okay? That's all right. I know the material.
And so we're really looking at, how do we transform your culture? And we started out with the transformation process of, your environment's going to change whether you like it or not. It's how do you embrace the transformation, and how do you really control that change? And you want to create strong relationships to build different culture, to build a different culture in your community. It's great to have history, and it's great to have a foundation. But yesterday, what I said was, every community or every county that we know of has a museum. So you document your past. Now, when you're driving your car, you look in a rear view mirror, and that's a much smaller place to look than your front windshield. So are you looking more at your past, or are you looking more at your future? And what we said yesterday was, if you have a museum in your county, you should have a think tank in your county that does nothing but futuristic thinking about the future, looking at trends. Where is your community going? Where are your opportunities that you can grasp that will attract people? And when you start to look at those trends, all right, you start to train the culture. You start to move that culture and craft that vision to where your community can get behind you, because when they see a place for them, and they know where they are going to go, they get excited. That's where that is. But if people are just looking at the past, they don't know where they're going in the future, they become anxious. And then they become passive. And then they become, oh, it's too big, I can never change. And then it becomes, oh, I don't have time to work on that because I just have to focus on day-to-day stuff. I'm just focusing on existing and maintaining. And that's where it gets dangerous. So you need that group of individuals that can catch fire and think like an entrepreneur and look at the future. Because as we have said before, entrepreneurs are very creative. They look at a need and they adapt and they find a solution to meet that need. And then the outcome is moving forward. So it's need, solution, outcome. Need, solution, outcome. What are your needs? What's the solution to that? And then where's the outcome? What are the results going to be? So it's looking at the need, finding and grasping that solution, and then crafting that vision to know where the outcome is going to be. That's your formula right there. And as we do that, you're starting to think like an entrepreneur and move your community forward. And so today we've talked a lot about how to move that community forward. What is the transformation? What's the environment going to do? And what are some of those strategic approaches that you can take to move your community forward? It takes a long-term commitment. We've talked about our colleague, Don Mackey, and his study with the community of Ord. And he crafted out 10 steps that community of Ord was doing over the course of the last 20 years. It's a long-term commitment. But they took on that and they have transformed their community. And that's a small, small community in a small, small county, really rural in Northeast Nebraska. And what they have, some of those steps are they have leadership and community engagement. So they have chosen to train and to do a specific type of leadership development program. And that is not a typical leadership program where you say, this is what this resource does, and this is what this resource does, and this is how you operate a meeting, and you put the minutes here, and you do here's the agenda, you get it out. That's not leadership, that's management. Leadership is how do you craft that vision? Leadership is all about attitude. What is your attitude towards the community? What is your attitude as a collaborative? How do you work with people? We call it collaborative leadership. How do you work with people, not how do you get a project done? That's one of their. Also, they look at meaningful commitment and investment for a sustained effort. It's a sustained effort over the course of a long time. They know their culture didn't get created the way it was. It took time. It took a lot of time to get to the culture to where it is. So it's not going to change overnight. It's not an immediate type of approach. You have to start changing. You have to say, we're going to run into some bumps and bruises, but we're going to stay on course. And we're going to adjust. We're going to adjust our sails, but we know where we're going. And this is where we're going to do. That's just like an entrepreneur. That's what an entrepreneur does. So if you want to know how an organization changed, how an organization was built to adjust for huge amounts of poverty in an area of the United States that has slow growth, the industry have changed around that region. We're going to be talking about Eastern Kentucky and the Appalachia region. We're going to be talking about a person that saw a need, thought like an entrepreneur, build an organization to address a huge, huge cultural shift and how they did it successfully. So come back tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. Central Daylight Time for Rural Community Solutions TV live stream, either here on the YouTube channel or Rural Community Solutions, our Facebook page, and come back for the interview of how they transformed Eastern Kentucky and the Appalachia region and really built an entrepreneurship environment.
So we're very excited that Jared Arnett is going to be joining us. He's with SOAR, and we just can't wait to hear what he has to say and share some ideas and approaches for how his 6 years at SOAR has really transformed that area and changed up their culture.
So if you want any comments, if you would like to give us some comments on what you're thinking of the show, write down the comment section here on YouTube or on the Facebook, wherever you're at, or you can email us at frank@ghorizons or kim@ghorizons.com, and we'd love to interact with you and start to build a relationship. So just, hey, mention where you're from. If you're watching this, mention where you're from. Give us a high five, a heads up. Tell us what you're thinking, and come on back, and we really appreciate it. And always, if you go to anchor.fm, you can get the podcast of the show right away. So as soon as I'm done here, we download it, I put it into a podcast, and there it is. So you can listen to it as you mow your lawn or shovel your driveway.
Depending on where you live.
So I'm Frank Spillers.
And I'm Kim Spillers. Thanks so much for joining us today. We appreciate it. We hope that you have taken away some really good ideas for how you can transform your organization or your community.
And remember, purpose is that feeling that you are a part of something bigger than yourself. So go out and be purposeful. Oh, that ending was supposed to be so much smoother. But hey, thanks for everything. Have a great day. Bye-bye.